All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
Hello.
Really
Hello, everyone.
excited. Really excited about today's show. So today we're going to be talking about how some teams delivered two times faster. So I know people are going to be trickling in, but if you can just as you join, if you can just say hello in the chat, just to make sure that we're being heard. I believe we are being heard. I can see the live signal, but yeah, let's get into it. So today we're going to be talking about how some teams deliver two times faster, and I I'm really excited to talk with today's guest. So let me just set this up quickly. Now, there's this perception that most projects end up being delayed. Most projects are late, right? Although in our resumes, we always deliver projects on time, but there's this perception out there that most projects are late. So I really want to get to the bottom of that. Like, why is it that a lot of our projects are late, and can this be avoided? Right. So I had the perfect guest to talk about this topic. Philip Marris, welcome to the show. How are you doing today, Philip?
I'm doing great. Beautiful day in Paris, France.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Yeah, we're just talking, and Philip was saying that it's spring in Paris, and I'm based in Toronto, and we are yet to see spring. It's still really really cold. I think this has been one of my worst winters, in Canada. So I'm envious. I'm envious, Philip. All right. So without further ado, Philip, why don't you introduce yourself for those that don't know who you are?
Well, hi to everybody. I had a quick look at who registered to join, and I'm very impressed by the very international nature of everybody here. So hello from all over the world, uh, and that's nice because we were talking about just before we started how my work is completely global. I work all over the place too. Anyway, I'm Philip Marris. I live in Paris, France, but I'm English and European. Try and work that one out. And I've been working for 40 years in industry and operations, and for only 20 years in projects. Historically, I started off in factories and I discovered what people call lean and the Toyota way these days, but it wasn't called that initially when I was starting it. And a bit later, I was hired by what we would call a startup by an Israeli physicist called Eliyahu Goldratt, who'd written a novel called The Goal, who went on to found and develop the theory of constraints. And so I've been mixing that and many other things, as I hope I'll make clear during the podcast. I love cocktails. I love mixing ideas, right? So lean is chronologically, theory of constraints, more recently agile, and whatever else needs to be put in, I mix that in. Um, After several jobs, 21 years ago, I created Marris Consulting, based in Paris, France. Um, and we do projects that are half project management, whether it's individual projects or portfolios, and the other half is the historical heart of what I do, which is in operations, improving the way you make things uh, and do the supply chain. Uh, it's true that we surprise people because my real passion is, and it's probably why I'm a consultant. I love going from one kind of object in one kind of factory to another, and one country to another. So we've basically tried to work on absolutely everything: cars, trains, planes, rockets, pharmaceuticals, McDonald's, Louis Vuitton, armament. More recently, anything we love doing. Right. So. That means that we have a very plural view of these subjects, and I find that fascinating. It's one of my little pleasures. So how do you make this? How do you make that and stuff? Um, and to This is all over the world. Although I'm based in Paris, France, I consider I nearly travel too much since it's more than three quarters. So I see too many airports in my life. But anyway, it means it's very interesting because I think that a lot of subjects, and project management is one of them, is kind of different depending on whether you're doing it in Vietnam or in China or in Saudi Arabia or in Canada or in South America, whatever. It's not quite the same, right? You have to take into account the culture of the company, culture of the people. So that's what we do. And well, thank you for your curiosity that will make you interested in what I have to say.
Right. So before we get into the podcast, proper, I'm really, I think one thing I really love about your background, Philip, is that you've worked across so many industries and so many sectors, and also so many countries, right? So I know I asked you this before the question, before we went live, but I think this is also something that the audience will want to know. Are there more? You've run projects across so many industries and sectors. Are there more similarities? Are there more differences than similarities, or vice versa? Or are there more similarities than differences?
Frankly, there are a lot more similarities. There are not that many differences. All the differences are generic. We discussed, for me, a nice practical example where people can understand why it's often very repetitive and generic. We do a certain number of projects. One kind of project is maintaining aircraft, right? And why is that something we do quite a lot of? I think that's another interesting point, which is because it's an area where people can work out how much money they win or lose by running the project properly or not, right? So there's money on the table. If I win a day, I know that's worth $15,000 or whatever. And so they make an effort. And so there's quite a lot of work going on to do that efficiently, right? And these are big, expensive objects. If you take an old aircraft, an old 747 that's nearly the end of life and stuff, it's all rusty and in bad shape and stuff, they're going to have a lot of surprises, findings, right?
Right.
And so there's quite a lot of uncertainty in there. And yet you take a new aircraft, properly designed and so forth, it's only a couple of years old, it's all new. And when you come in for the maintenance, you just change the oil, right? So the way you do this just shows that there's very different levels of uncertainty, obviously, in the project environment. When we're developing, I don't know, pharmaceutical drugs, looking at new molecules, you don't know. You might have to stop the project after 2 years because you discover it's dangerous, right? So yeah, there are differences, of course. I'm not saying all projects are the same, but the background, the level of uncertainty, the complexity, the capacity people have to courageously say I have a problem or I don't know, all these sorts of things. That's generic to projects, whatever the country, whatever the type of project. I think that's my take.
Interesting. And another question. So you've worked across different sectors, also across different countries. Would you say there are more differences on the country vector, if I can put it that way, as opposed to the industry?
I think so, because we'll talk about it when we get into the details. One of the important things about projects is that people have to feel free to talk about uncertainty honestly. Okay, allowed to say I don't know. I mean, it's fascinating because in some ways the project management was born there, right? Because what is program evaluation and review technique, PERT, right? It asks you what the optimistic times are, the pessimistic times are, and so forth. And it admits that the duration of a task, let alone a project, is a probabilistic distribution, right? And you're allowed to say it might, if I'm lucky, it's going to be 2 days. If I have a few problems, it's going to be 4 days. If I have a lot of problems, it's going to take 6 days, right? The answer is I don't know, right? And that the capacity of different cultures to do that is different, right? And in France, or I believe in Canada, and for instance, from my experience, that's okay. People are pretty, in a healthy company culture, people are capable of talking like that and admitting that there's uncertainty. In other cultures, in other countries, it can be very difficult because it's considered to being a bad employee to say I don't know. So you give a number, you say 5, right? And as we'll see, we'll go into the details. If you force people to give numbers, they add padding, and that's where things go mad, right? They're saying 5 and they say a reliable 5 when they think maybe it's only 2. But since the boss is asking me for a number, I'll give a number. I'll add some padding into the safety factor so that I remain a reliable employee.
Right. So you need to understand the psychology of the culture that you're dealing with, to know how to navigate that. That's really fascinating.
Of the culture, two levels: of the culture of the country, and of your boss. What he's prepared to live with uncertainty.
Right. Amazing. So let's get into the interview proper. So why are projects late?
Why are projects late? Well, we just mentioned one of the key aspects, which is that Management in general, some managers just only manage projects, but if you take a CEO or whatever, they have lots of things going on in their business. Projects is just one of the things they manage, right? And management detests uncertainty, right? They want to know what the profits are going to be, what the sales are going to be, and whatever. They've promised it to the shareholders. They've done this and done that, so they don't like uncertainty, and therefore they force this pseudo certainty on project management, and they ask people for commitments. I want you to commit to when this product will go on to the market, right? Will it be on the 15th of January and whatever, right? And because that regularly fails, we talked about it in the introduction. I mean, the on-time finish in projects is somewhere between 10 and 50%, maybe, depends on what you're looking at. It's not good. Because you fail, then they start micromanaging it and say, I'm gonna have a stage gate here and a stage gate there and whatever, and I want to make sure that you're on time at these various points. And they get more and more micromanagement. The more they micromanage, the more safety people take into account, put into the system, right? And the whole thing starts going completely mad, right? So that's one point. The second thing that makes it all go mad is that, and I hope that's one of the advantages I have coming from manufacturing, right? I did 20 years of manufacturing before I got into projects. In manufacturing, you have numbers. How long does it take to drill a hole in a piece of steel? 17 seconds. How long does it take to do this and whatever? So you can calculate capacities, right? And have an idea of what you're capable of doing. In projects environments, you're trying to work out how long it takes to find a supplier, how long it takes to have a good idea and prove a concept, how long is it going to take to write some code. You don't have a clue on any of those numbers, right? People are making them up. So you don't know the workload, and therefore you don't know the capacity of your system, right? Again, top management detests that. So they basically, in most cases, work on hydraulic pressure. That's to say that the more projects they put into the system, they think the more is going to come out, right? They don't have any idea what the system is capable of. They just think, right, let's just push it in, and therefore there'll be more work for more people, and therefore more will come out. In fact, that kills the system. It all goes mad, and people turn into multitasking, craziness, and very, very little comes out of the system because they put too much work into the thing. There's no flow, right? There's no flow. So that's why the thing goes mad, and it's made that much more impressive in projects compared to manufacturing because, as I say, there are no numbers, and you can perfectly have people with twice as much capacity as they need. They only have 4 hours of work every day. In fact, in reality, if you looked at it coldly, but their top management is making sure everybody's busy, so they have to fake work or invent work. And they end up inventing work, which is then going to increase the workload on somebody else by they started something too early. They didn't have anything to do, so they started producing something when there was only a draft specification, that sort of stuff, and the whole thing goes mad, completely mad. I don't know if that's as a introductory.
Right.
That's why it goes completely mad.
Right. So let me just reflect what I heard back, and let me know if I'm on track. So in terms of why many projects are late, number one, I heard a lot of times we impose this fake certainty on projects, right? So that's one. The other is we don't have a correct understanding of actual capacity, right? And then we just impose more projects, right? And people are now forced to sort of juggle all of these. So these are the two main reasons I heard. Am I on
Absolutely
track?
Yes.
Okay. So that's good. Now, is this common to all industries? Because like right now we're talking about pseudo certainty and a lack of understanding of capacity. So I guess it's all uncertainty. Is this more pronounced in some industries than others?
On one aspect, yes, that's to say the number of projects you can put into the system, right, will depend on the environment. Some you basically have an infinite possibility of adding projects. Take research and development in pharmaceuticals. Quite a few went very, very mad because it's harder and harder to find a blockbuster. So you launch more and more research on more and more options for new drugs, and there's no limit to that. So you can have 300 different drugs being developed simultaneously in an organization, which is completely crazy. In other environments, money or space limits the amount of simultaneous projects. If you take aircraft, for instance, there's only so many you can put into the hangar, right? That sort of stuff.
Right.
Or it can be different from one environment to another, but the basics are the same.
Okay. All right. What about, and maybe you've also touched on this as well. What about things like behaviors and mindset? I know you mentioned, like, in some countries, some people are, less likely to state the actual facts, right? So do you think that also contributes to why projects are late?
Yes, absolutely. And on that, specifically on that subject of, am I allowed to say either I have a problem, or I'm going to be late, or how much time it's going to take? I don't know. That's sort of these subjects. There's the national culture, okay, but then there's very much the culture of the company. You can have two companies in the same town. In one, it's quite easy to talk about these things. In another one, the boss just doesn't like to hear that I don't know. So he forces people to make up stupid numbers all the time. So that is different. And so that it's the management of uncertainty and the trusting people is going to be different, right?
Right.
Behind all this is, do I trust the guy to do his job properly? That's why I'm asking for commitments and stuff.
Okay. So culture, and culture can differ from company to company, or even from state to state. Okay, so that's amazing. I see lots of comments coming in. So if you do have questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them towards the end of the interview. Right now, we're just going to do a quick commercial break. So if you're watching this on YouTube or on Substack, please do go ahead and subscribe. It's free to you. It helps us to be discovered and to bring more amazing guests like Philip. If you're seeing this on Apple or Spotify, do give us a 5-star rating if you're enjoying this so far. All right. So let's get back to the show. Now, I want to talk about how we deliver projects faster on time. So before the break, we talked about why projects tend to be late. So how do we fix this? How do we deliver projects faster on time? So Philip, I know you have a particular methodology that you use. So do you want to maybe introduce us to the approach and set the scene for us?
Okay. I said earlier on, we're very much cocktail makers, right? So I'm going to talk about critical chain project management, but in reality, when we do things, we're mixing it in with agile, with lean, with lots of other ideas, right? But anyway, what is probably unknown to many people listening is critical chain project management. Critical chain project management was born quite recently in 1997 by a book called Critical Chain, written by Elio Goldratt, who is the founder of the Theory of Constraints movement and the author of The Goal. The Goal, I highly recommend. It's 11 million copies in 32 languages, even though it's not a project book. It's a fascinating book. Anyway, he did that, and later he started working on project management, and he proposed critical chain. And it is all about explicitly and scientifically, if possible, managing uncertainty and risks, right? And as I said, this is fascinating because it was already meant to be there in, for instance, the PERT formula, Program Evaluation and Review Technique. And people who have university training on project management or PMI training know, you're meant to talk about uncertainty in the task duration. Anyway, it's all about putting that into the system, but then realizing to what extent in the real world, in companies and stuff, you're mixing in career development and politics with that reality, and the idea that a reliable employee will give a date and honor it. Okay, so because the duration of tasks is variable, the employee will give a duration which is safe, where he thinks there's a good probability of him meeting that commitment at a task level, right? And you sum all that up, and you end up with projects, right? Networks of tasks and stuff. Okay, I could go into further details about what's going on behind that, but anyway, that's how it's done in a waterfall approach. Okay, but what happens is that, and why have we, if we've done all that, and if all the tasks have safe durations, how come all projects finish late? Okay, that is because all the bad news accumulates and all the good news evaporates. Okay, you can only get late. Since the person is committed to 5 weeks, and if they do finish it in 2 weeks, they're not going to go to their boss and say, "Hey, I've done it in 2 weeks." They're going to tune it, focus it, improve it, check it, whatever, and give it, like a good employee, 4 weeks and 4 days before, just before the deadline that they promised. They're a good, reliable employee, right? And also in a multi-project environment, there's what we call the student syndrome, which is that they won't even start on that task if they've said 5 weeks. They won't start on the first week or the second week, right? They'll wait until it's the most urgent thing they have to do. For the first weeks, they're working on something else, right? So they said 5 weeks. They know it only takes 2 weeks, but they start just a week before their promise, and everything goes mad, right? And that's when they find, it's complicated. I need a lot more time. Okay. What we call the student syndrome, right? You waste all the safety you've asked for. The analogy being, if a professor gives a piece of homework, you don't start that evening, right? You do it the night before, right? You do it at the last moment. Anyway, so to avoid that, that any good news evaporates and gets consumed, and you only end up with bad news, the theory of constraint says, let's not do it that way. For each task, let's ask people 2 different durations: focused duration or optimistic duration, and pessimistic duration. So you're allowed to say, for that task, I don't know, it's going to take me between 4 days and 9 days, right? 4 days if I'm lucky, 9 days if I have problems. And throughout the system, you do that. And then you keep just the focused optimistic durations in your scheduling, okay? And you sum up all the safety, all the differences between focused and pessimistic, and you have a big buffer, about 1/3 of the duration of a project at the end of the project, which belongs to everybody, okay? And then that's how you plan a project. And if you do that, by the way, the buffer doesn't have to be the sum of all the local safeties, because it's a bit like an insurance system, right? Not everybody's going to have bad luck, right? So you can have less than the sum of the local safeties as a global buffer. And then you just look and see as you execute how well. It's hard to do it just online without any pictures. You just look and see if you're consuming your buffer at the right rate or not, if you're consuming it too quickly or too slowly. Okay, and that's how it's done. It works on individual projects. You take into account all these things and end up having a good reliability of finishing on time, which means that if all your projects have good probabilities of finishing on time, managing a portfolio is very easy. You just have a bunch of healthy projects, and in fact, it's a lot easier than managing a project individually. Okay, how do you make sure all of them finish on time? I think I shared it in writing and on LinkedIn for this event. It's just like people taking an aircraft, taking an airplane, right? Why do people not miss planes? Why do they finish their project of getting to the plane on time? It's because they know that the only way in an uncertain environment to finish on time is to finish a little early. So you get to the boarding gate 1 hour or 10 minutes before, depending on how well you know the airport, what uncertainty there is, right? It's the same in project environment. If you want to get to 100% finishing on time, you aim to finish them all a little early. That's what you do with critical chain approach. And that's really cool. It has a lot of secondary benefits because it's a really dangerous spot to be, right? Those last few days or weeks before the promised end date, right? So if you can finish calmly a little bit before, it's like it's like being bored waiting for one's airplane to take off. Okay. And that's it. If that's simplistic, I could add stuff, but that's the heart of it. The other 2 things are to reduce the work in progress, the number of projects simultaneously, so you don't multitask like mad. And this technique has this strange idea that to manage a portfolio, you make it easy by making sure that each individual project can finish early. And so what's the problem if I have lots of healthy projects?
Okay. So thank you for sharing that. So there are lots of things I want to get into just to make sure that, like I'm following and everybody else is following. So going back to the estimation being done at the task level. So you said, it's a range between the optimistic and the pessimistic, right?
Yep.
So, and then you mentioned that when you sum it up, like when you aggregate it, the timeline for the entire project is the optimistic timeline in aggregate. Is that correct?
You have the sum of the optimistic times, which gives you a duration, but that obviously is impossible because not everybody's going to, some people are going to have problems. Okay, so you add then a buffer, which is a duration, and that duration is very often around 1/3 of the duration of the project. So you can have, I don't know, if you have a project where all the optimistic time is 2 months,
Right.
okay, the sum of the different tasks is 2 months, you will add a third, 1 month at the end, and have a 3-month timeline. And what you promise to your boss or to the market is 3 months. Okay, and then you try and finish, a week or two early.
Gotcha. So the question I was gonna, thanks for clarifying that. So the timeline, I guess the external timeline is the optimistic timeline plus the buffer, right? Yes. That is it. Now the buffer, you mentioned 30%. Yes. Is there a rationale behind that number, the 30%? Sorry.
It's people have who've been doing this a long time see that it's often around 30%. But to come back to the example I gave earlier on, if you're working on an aircraft, an old aircraft such as a 747 will take more like sort of 40 or 50% buffer because there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainty. A healthy buffer project with very few unknowns will only have maybe 15 to 20% buffer.
Right. Okay. So 30% is sort of like an industry standard. Like that's a good rule of thumb. That's what I'm.
It's a pretty good rule of thumb. Yeah. Okay. It can go up to 80% in really crazy situations.
Right.
Just the level of uncertainty in the project.
Right. Okay. But what if you have projects, because a lot of us also have projects where where there's a lot of, like, we've never done this before, like this is the first time we're doing it. What would your advice be there when it comes to the buffer? Sorry about that.
Well, nearly by definition, they've never done it before, right? That's what a project is, or never like that, exactly. So that's always there. And we've been using it in projects which are absolutely impossible, or look absolutely impossible to look ahead and finish, like I know deep tech product development and stuff, where there are more questions than answers in what you're doing, and you still maintain the process of estimating a possible series of future tasks getting you to the finishing line. And then you challenge them and change them as you discover, this is true, this is not true, whatever. And you can add, this is just classical risk management. You say, there is a significant probability that I'm going to have this or that to do as well. So I'll put it into my planning. If it doesn't occur, that's good news. I didn't have that problem.
Right. Okay. All right. That's all right. So I think I follow now at the task level, and then we aggregate that all the way up to the project level. Just give me a second. I had a question. Okay, so now, yeah, before the estimation, you mentioned that critical, it's really about the theory of constraints, right? Yeah. So if I were to, I'm trying to have like a almost like a one sentence definition of what critical project management is. Like, could you help me succinctly, like, what is it? Critical project management, critical chain project management. Yeah.
As I say, I think it's the explicit management of uncertainty, which is integrated both into the planning and into the execution, to ensure that you have a good probability of keeping the thing in control and probably finishing on time. There's again, it's hard to show with my hands, but there's an indicator, a KPI, which looks like a postcard or a flag, where that you see the project going up and consuming its buffer. So you have a very good idea of what's going on in your project, which is cool, because very often management tends to, when they have a portfolio, not a single project, when they have a portfolio, they spend all their time looking at the projects near the end, near the finish, or overdue. And they don't look at the projects that have been launched recently, that are going to be the priorities and the problems of 1 year or 2 years' time, right? and so they're not looking at the right place. They're firefighting rather than being in an anticipation mode and looking at what's going wrong early on in the project when there's still enough time to find a solution. Like, I don't know, marketing and research and development really don't agree on this one. There's something crazy going on. We've been at it for 6 months and there's absolutely nothing come out yet. That sort of stuff. Rather than fighting about the one which is already 1 year overdue, and everybody's talking about.
Right. So, if I were to put this in my own words, CCPM is really about, first of all, it's really about managing uncertainty, right? And first things first, you want to make sure that you properly understand what is going to take to deliver the project in terms of timeline, right? So you put the right estimates at first, with the right amount of buffer, to the best of your ability. And then moving forward from there, you really make sure that you are tracking your buffer, like how much your buffer is being consumed, because a lot of times we actually find out too late. It's like, oh yeah, the project is late. But if you're actually tracking how much you're consuming your buffer, like, that's a very, very proactive way of managing your project. So, you could never, it's going to be very difficult for you to end up, late. And I like the example where you gave. It's like, okay, when we want to catch a flight, we do everything in our power to arrive 1 to 2 hours before, right? And that is a kind of good analogy for understanding critical project management. Did I?
Yes, all that is absolutely true, and I really use that analogy for aircraft catching a plane very often, because we're very good at catching planes, aren't we? And yet we have to get through the traffic, through the security gate, and whatever. And that's a lot of uncertainty there, and we don't miss planes. It's about more than 99% on time. Not many people finish their planes. They miss their planes, but as soon as they get into the project world, the whole thing falls apart, and the performance is very poor. The other dimension to be added to what we've just said as a description is, hence the name theory of constraints. Where is the bottleneck in the system, right? Rather than trying to manage the work of everybody and the workload of everybody, the theory of constraints says the work is not equitably distributed. Some people have the short straw. They have more work than everybody else. They are the constraint or the bottleneck of the system. Okay, we must find them and make sure that they're protected from the madness and that they can work properly, efficiently, since they are the ones that determine how much the whole system, the whole organization can produce. Okay, that's the other important thing. And I'd say this is important because more in the project world than in the manufacturing world, people will just pour more and more projects into the system, and the whole thing will just get very, very chaotic. And you often find that the bottleneck resources, that are often people, right, end up with a very chaotic work environment, and they become very inefficient because they're multitasking. They're going from 5 minutes of this, 5 minutes of that, 5 minutes of this, and not having a good work hygiene, right? So they're not producing very much every day. In many environments.
Okay. So, finding bottlenecks. So first of all, make sure that you had the right estimates with the right buffer. Now you kick off the project. So you're monitoring how you're consuming your buffer. And then also another thing that you need to be cognizant of is that you need to be on the lookout for where your bottlenecks are in the system. And then you attack those bottlenecks, for lack of a better word.
Yes. Except often in practice, when one is implementing these ideas, we start with identifying the bottleneck and getting more out of the bottleneck, and only just afterwards we look at uncertainty and management of uncertainty.
Right. Before I move forward, just going back to the estimation, what's the point of the pessimistic? Because we have the optimistic and then you have the pessimistic. What's the point of the pessimistic estimate? Because at the end we're going to use like a buffer, right? But what's the point of the pessimistic estimate?
Well, you look at the differences there are between the optimistic and pessimistic durations of the tasks, and that gives you a good idea, or rough idea anyway, of the level of uncertainty in your project, right? If people are always saying 4 days is optimistic, 5 days is pessimistic, that sort of stuff all over the place, you realize that you're on a project which has very little variability and needs a small buffer. If people say things like, it'll take me 2 days if all goes well, but it might take me 3 weeks if I have a problem, you've got a lot of uncertainty. You're going to need a big buffer, right? That's why you need those two numbers.
Nice. Okay, so in such a case where the the range is so wide, how do you now like what is your like what do you do as a project manager? What's your thought process? Is it how can I reduce the uncertainty so that we can have better estimates? Is it I just need
Yes,
a bigger buffer? Like what's the thought process?
yeah, it's very, very rich. That conversation, by the way, is just fantastically rich and revealing. Yeah. So somebody comes to you and says it's going to take 2 days or 3 weeks. You go,
Right.
what? What do you mean? You say, why? You ask them why? What? And they say, well, purchasing always takes about 4 weeks to validate my purchase order. So you say,
Right.
so you realize the problem is quite easy fix. It's because there's
Mm,
a silo between the research and development and purchasing, and they're wasting a lot of time ordering stuff.
mhm.
And so this, rather than just taking that 3 weeks, you go to purchasing and say, hey, can we find a new way of working where for these
Right.
kind of requests you're going to deal with them in less than a week rather than up to 3 weeks. And they commit to that, and you go back to the person who said 3 weeks. Said, if I promise that purchasing will always validate your purchase orders in less than a week, do you accept that your pessimistic duration is only a week now rather than 3 weeks? And they say yes.
Mm,
Okay,
right.
so it's when people announce big differences, they can be noble. I don't know. This is the first time, but they can also be uh, um, revealing of silos
Right.
or or corporate governance issues as to why there's uncertainty.
Right. I like that. It forces that conversation because you also know because otherwise you just skip that and then there's this false confidence, right? And
Absolutely.
then things now reveal themselves much later on. So I like that. Like just what's your range? And also the other thing I like about that, those cultures where people are afraid to speak up. I think this gives them permission, right? It's like, okay, what's the optimistic, what's the worst case scenario? And then, especially if you know that you're in a culture where it's like very hierarchical, people don't tend to speak up, then you actually know how to navigate things better. So I really like that idea of two
Yeah.
estimates.
And by the way, the other fascinating thing about this part of the approach is that nobody knows the real answers. What is my real focus duration or optimistic duration? They don't know because they never work in healthy environments
Right.
with a good thing. So they're only guessing. Nobody knows. As long as they give you better times than they used to, you're on the right track, right? And then little
Mm,
by little, everybody will start understanding better what a focused or optimistic duration looks like because they've never worked that way. I mean, I know this because it's not only we apply it with our clients, but we apply it to ourselves, right? And if you've understood multitasking and focused durations, you start looking at how to work in a focused way. And for
mhm.
instance, I know to write a proposal now, I know how many hours it will take to write this kind or that kind of proposal. I didn't know when I started because I broke it up into little bits, and it would take a week. And I never stopped to work out, if I did it, if I shut the door and wrote it, it would only take me 5 hours. I thought it took me 25, but no. People
Right.
don't know how long it takes them to do the work in good working conditions because they're working in a madhouse.
Right. Right.
I mean, it's even more interesting since people have developed working from home, right? Uh, some people say when they're overloaded, hey boss, can I stay at home tomorrow because I've really got a lot of work to do, which is another
Mm,
way of saying I can't work at work. I need to go home. it's a corrosive office, and the best place to work is at home.
right. Right. No, that's a whole nother discussion. So, Philip, how does this fit with agile?
Well, my answer might be curious because I've always, as I summarized right at the beginning, I've always been very plural. I love mixing in ideas. I
Mhm.
started off with the world of lean, Toyota way, and so forth. A little bit later, I discovered the world of theory of constraints, and I thought they were made for each other. 1+1 = 3, and that's what I've been doing. Agile, very much in the same way. I think there's a lot of good ideas to merge between these things. And for me, frankly, the reasons why people tend to say, you have to choose this agile waterfall or whatever, is that people are mixing in the good and the bad, right? The good lean and the bad lean, the good theory of constraints and the bad theory of constraints, the good agile and the bad agile. It all exists, doesn't it? Right? And then you end up with stupid discussions like, good agile is better than bad waterfall. Of course it is. But good waterfall is probably better than bad agile, right? So they're going to have an infinite discussion because they have their ideas about what's going on when there's good stuff in all of it, right? And I don't know, you had Jeff Sutherland on the show in the first season. He wrote a book. I had to check the name because it's not a very sexy name. Agile Management for Software Engineering: Applying Theory Constraints for Business Results. Right? He among others, understands that plural solutions are interesting, and frankly, fighting one way against another of doing things is probably people who have not. I don't know, or either that's because they're selling this and not that, or
Right.
they have a very limited view of what these things are. I mean, good agile is obviously powerful. Bad agile, and there's more bad agile than good agile in the world, right? Is obviously not a very efficient way of doing things, right? It's just a holiday camp.
Right. So if I'm hearing you correctly, I think there's a lot of dogma that exists, and for some people it might be, there could be ulterior motives, maybe like that's their line of work, and all of that, and other people, like, it's just maybe how they've been brought up in the profession. But if I'm understanding you correctly, it's about understanding the situation and then deploying what fits the situation, right? So if it's a mix of theory of constraints, agile, whatever, if it's, you can use something at the project level, you can mix it up at the deliverable level, the task level. Is that sort of what I'm hearing? Okay.
Absolutely, it's like that, but I'm even more down to earth than that. And it's quite often the case in certain environments, especially software development environments, agile cannot be neither diluted or broken or whatever. You have to live with it because it's just part of the system. Nobody's going to. You blend it in as it is, right? You can't always break something and replace it by something. So if agile is a must, then you can add or make coexist agile and critical change. A lot of our work in project development in software has full agile, preferably good agile, with critical chain over the top to give you good visibility of when you're going to be finishing your projects.
Let me ask you this, Philip. So would you, because you've run so many projects and you still run so many projects across industries, including agile, software development projects, would you do a project without CCPM, an agile project without CCPM?
Yeah.
You will? Okay.
If you want to do a proof of concept stage early on in software development, I'm happy doing it pure agile. You asked a good question earlier on, which is what happens if there is total uncertainty about where we're going? Well, then you don't try and plan things. Okay.
Right.
The problem is that bad agile has developed on top of good agile, and you see a lot of bad agile there. So people get very confused about what agile really is or should be.
Right.
But certainly good. I mean, none of these ideas, none of them ever were born and were developed because they were stupid, dangerous, and brought no value. Right? They all have a good reason to be there. Right? And try and understand those good reasons and use all that beauty in your solutions, right? I mean, obviously, agile has proven it's fantastic. It has also shown that it can be abused very easily, and you end up with this world where 95% of agile is doubtful.
I really love that, like what you just mentioned. Like, all of these things were born out of necessity, right? And I think we tend to forget. It's almost like, okay, this is what we do here. This is how we run this kind of, and we just blindly follow, the way things have been done, or we just take a methodology because, like, this is the in thing now. But understanding why did that methodology, why was it developed in the first place? I think that's very important, and we should always sort of remind ourselves and have that at the back of our mind so that we can, like, meet the moment in the right way, right? So I really like that. I think that's a very good reminder for me. Yeah, amazing. So can you give us maybe some examples of how CCPM has been used to deliver projects early? It could be from your own experience or even from other experience out there in the industry.
Well, you mentioned it in the pitch for this one, so I have to talk about it. The Embraer development of the E195 aircraft. It's not a Marris consulting project. They did that on their own. We've helped Embraer, but we've helped them in the other division in business jets. But anyway, they developed the E195 and they finished 22 and a half months early, right? Which is kind of crazy. Now, frankly, people must understand that Embraer played with or learnt little by little critical change for nearly 20 years before they had the courage to bet a whole aircraft, and in fact a big part of the future of Embraer at the time on this plane, which was a great success, both in timing and in sales and so forth. Right, so that's one. If you look at projects we do, let's say I've done well over 100 assignments, which within that means they're more like sort of, I don't know, over 1,000 different projects in there. We find that you can go basically twice as fast, hence the name of this conference, this podcast. Sometimes it's true, it's only 20% faster, and other times it's 80 or 90% faster. Okay, that's one thing that people are asking for. They finish on time, and that's often the main dream of the person who's going down that road, to get better visibility on finishing on time, and you can get up to 100%. We have a client who's been using it in aeronautical equipment manufacturer, right, designing parts of airplane for the Boeings and Airbus of this world. They finished their product developments of their parts at over 98% on time, right? 98%. And they have, the usual madness of the world, of the client changing his mind at the last moment and all that stuff. Yet they're very, very good at it. And we have a lot of clients that get those sorts of numbers in project development. Okay, which is that's remarkable. What people are not expecting, which is the extra bonus, is that if you do that, you also end up becoming a lot more efficient. Your productivity or your efficiency improves significantly, and you can finish maybe twice as many projects per year, right? So not only are you going twice as fast for each individual project, but you're using half as many days or hours on these projects, and therefore they're just a lot more efficient. Those are the results you get.
Right, Philip. Why is CCPM not widely known among PMs? I mean, if for those of you listening, if you know about CCPM, I mean, you can mention that in the chat. But like when I studied project management, I don't think I heard about CCPM.
No, it's not. It's still not in many university curriculums. Less than, I don't know if it's less than 1%, but certainly less than 10% of universities talk about critical change. And if they talk about it, they give a very rapid overview, which doesn't give it a chance to be understandable, I think. Although me and my colleagues, we teach a certain number of universities, but anyway, why? That's a very good question, and I don't know if this resounds with people listening. We have, it seems to me, failed whatever the subject with good ideas. Right? Look at Agile. We talked about it. Agile's fantastic. It obviously it fulfills a need. Should be used more widely. And yet Agile today has got itself a bad reputation, and we're starting to move away from it, as if there was something wrong with it, right? And moving on to other stuff. So there are many, and lean, the Toyota way, right? I live in France. There is a factory in France with 5,000 people of Toyota producing a small car, the Yaris, every 57 seconds. It produces 1/3 of the cars in France in just this little factory, and car of the year and all that stuff. Toyota has shown that it's a really efficient way to run factories, the Toyota way. Nobody's copying it. There are no competitors that do the same thing, right? So a lot of these good ideas are not going mainstream. We seem to be masochists. We seem to really like doing things badly and sticking to old, broken ways of doing things, whatever the subject. I mean, we're talking here about critical change. I'd say the same with Agile and the same with lean in the world. These things are proven that they work. People are using it and succeeding with it. But not everybody is doing it. Why aren't there more people doing good agile? Why aren't there more people doing good lean? Why aren't there more people doing good critical chain? Because they're all getting it wrong and saying therefore it doesn't work. So they go back to, I don't know what. I mean, frankly, the main way of running projects today is neither agile nor critical chain nor the PMBOK. It's freestyle, right? It's a big mess, right? All sorts of things. A mixture of agile and waterfall and very bad performance and a lot of stress, right?
Right. Yeah, no. I guess I'm still trying to figure out, because like even the other ones that you talked about, like, lean,
Yeah.
we all know about lean, we all know about agile, waterfall, Kanban, and all of that. But for some, like critical chain, and especially, if with critical chain you can deliver a lot faster, and it's been proven that you can develop, like I guess to me, I'm just a bit surprised as to why that's not more widely known. Yeah, so that's sort of the puzzle that I have, if that makes sense.
I think, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. I think, unfortunately, one of the reasons is that quite a few people present these things the same way I presented a few minutes ago, but with in a different twist, which makes it very sounds very lack of trust. The durations, focused duration, or optimistic durations and pessimistic durations, right? Very often, if you stand back and you do it a lot, you'll find that about half the time is a focused duration, and the other half is the safety that people have added to get to pessimistic. So half the time is work, and half the time is safety. Okay. Some people implementing critical chain say top down, I take all your task durations, I divide them by 2, and we run and we can finish our projects twice as fast. Now, that sounds kind of stupid, doesn't it? Of course, if you cut all your durations of your tasks in half, you're going to pretend you're going twice as fast. Okay, so if they present it in that way, everybody thinks it's a stupid, crazy idea and backs away, right? And so what we do, is you spend the time, 4 hours, 8 hours, explaining the logic of why they're allowed to give 2 durations and what the logic is, and why it's not a trick question. Okay, and then they give you these numbers, which are indeed about 50% focused and 50% safety, but it comes from them, right? And so, frankly, if you take the time, it takes a bit more than what the time we have here to do it, to explain the mechanism, the logic of critical chain. People are seduced by the ideas, and they're very enthusiastic, and it works well. But brutally saying cut the times in half and you'll go twice as fast obviously doesn't sound very convincing, does it?
Right. What do you think about this, Philip? I don't know if you've read this book by Ben Flyberg, How Big Things Get Done.
Yeah.
So one of the things that he mentioned is that you actually need to slow down like a lot. Like he's a big believer in slow, like the planning phase is very important. And out there in corporate, the forces are pushing in the other direction. Like, let's get started quickly. Like, what's all this planning and all of that? Like, even if you plan, it's going to be wrong anyway.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And it's the most difficult thing about getting started is exactly what you're talking about. Very often, we start in a company implementing critical chain on the big critical project that's late. Right, that's why when they accept to use these crazy unknown ideas, they must be hurting, right? So they call us, say, we have this thing, it's costing us $1 million a day. We need to put it back on track. We say, okay, we're going to apply critical chain. I want all the 10 key people who know this project in a room for 2 days to plan. I can't do that, right? So yes, the absolutely agree. It's crazy how people have decided they don't need or to plan or can't plan or don't have the time to plan. Yes, it's absolutely fundamental. And I was talking about it again just earlier on today for a nuclear power plant. Imagine the money it costs. And they hadn't finished properly the design. They'd already been building it for 8 years, and they still haven't finished the design. What a mess! What a mess! So absolutely agreed. And I think, the only thing I would add, and I know we agree because we've talked about it previously, is that it's not just how much time you spend planning. You have to do it properly, and in doing it properly, you have to have the right. You have to stay at the right level of detail, right? And not get into micro details. Too many times I see project plans for big complicated things with 100,000 tasks because we have computers and we can do it. People think, let's put in a lot of details, right? But when you get that much detail, you can't see what's going on anymore, right? So yes, you must plan these projects, but you must also make sure that you stay at the right level of detail, because if you don't watch out, computers will enable you to get to much too much detail, and then nobody understands what's going on anymore. There's a lot of data errors in there, and the whole thing just becomes, you have special project managers that are just running the system but don't know what the project was all about, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, mega projects we could talk about at more length, but I completely agree with his ideas about how you should slow down and plan.
Right. And do you think that that correlates to the, what's the word now, to the level of criticality, to how critical the project is? Like, if it's going to be, a project that there are lots of unknowns, we don't really know what we're doing.
It's the lack of trust that leads to micromanagement.
No, sorry. I guess I meant, my question is, so as a project manager who is sort of well versed in different, methodologies, and all of that, I assume that you're not always gonna take a long time to plan for every project. Like, if maybe there are so many unknowns, you might decide, okay, you know what, let's just do a 2-week spike. Let's just figure out something out. And then once you figure that out, maybe that will now, feed into the plan. And then there's some projects that even before you start, like let us make sure that we actually plan properly. I guess my question is that the spending of time planning, does that sort of vary with how critical and important the project is? Does my question make sense?
I think we've basically all abandoned the ambition to plan properly. So we're starting at a very low point, right? When we're at 0 Kelvin often when we start this stuff, and people will just take a copy of their previous project and use that, or start from a blank sheet of paper and all that stuff. Normally, but again, you find this more in stuff like lean engineering than in other areas. You can have templates, right? Take a company that sells physical products. It should have a template for how it develops a new product. It should have a template which is how you develop a variant of the new product. It should have a template for a project of moving that production of the factory from one place to another, adding an extra country, and these sorts of things. And probably you should have about 8 families or types of projects in your system. And for each of these, you have a template. That template has too much detail because it's there to cover all the different permutations possible. But you start with that, and then you say, I don't need that, I don't need that, I don't need that. You trim it off, and very quickly you end up with a project plan where you put in the durations. This one's complicated, the electrical part is complicated, this one is easy, and whatever. And so you get good at planning, and if you do it that way, you don't forget stuff, right? The way people are planning is so badly done that they forget stuff that they should have remembered. They're just not rigorous, right? We not only do we speed up, as I've said, incredibly, but we then put in a process of ongoing improvement, which is to ask people to write down when they go slower than the optimistic duration, right? So when they're between optimistic and pessimistic, why were you slower? Okay, so they're happy because they said that that was the optimistic. It's no big deal if they went longer than the optimistic, and they say, well, we had to do a task that wasn't in the plan. Okay, or I didn't have the full kit of deliverables from the upstream stuff. And you do this as you're executing, and you get a lot of focused ongoing improvement, right? The first thing that always turns up in the first year when you're using these techniques is it wasn't in the plan. We forgot it. All the boring stuff, all the quality stuff, all the testing stuff, all the stuff that nobody really wants to do, they forgot it. So yeah, it's planning is very important, and people have try to ignore the subject and plan very badly. It's very strange.
Yeah, no, and I've witnessed this so many times. Like even in the same company, you have, the project has been done multiple times, but because there's a lot of silos, like people don't even know that, oh, this project was done. I could have just you know taken their plan and built on it, and sometimes even those projects are running at the same time, and then you're like, oh my goodness, we actually duplicating effort, right? So yeah, totally resonate with that. Now I want to talk about bottlenecks before we move into like practical next steps. So you talked about like one of the after you've kicked off the project and you're sort of executing, monitoring and controlling, one of the things that you have to pay attention to is identifying bottlenecks. Now, what are the different types of bottlenecks and how do you identify those?
Okay, you identify them by the queues of work. Okay, and our rule of thumb is that somewhere in the system, if you're experienced in finding these queues, you'll find a step in the process, a resource in the process that has 1/4, 25% of the overall lead time of the project. There'll be a big backlog of work somewhere in the portfolio, and that's where you found your constraint. Okay, where is it? It can be either a person or a department or a part of a team, right? The architect, the software architects in a department or something. So a person, part of a team, or the whole team. Okay, very often. If it is a person, it happens at least 20% of the time in our projects. One single person. Okay, that you've hit a gold mine. Because if you look at how they spend their day, it's complete madness. People run after them with things to sign and opinions to give and whatever, and so they have a work hygiene that's zero, and they get very little done during the day. You protect them from that madness. You make sure that everybody prepares the work and doesn't destroy that person's efficiency, and you can get 3 times more out of the system, right? And everybody else has excess capacity, so you will get 3 times more out of your 500-person organization by just dealing with one person. I've done this several times. Right? I repeat, one person is the bottleneck out of 500. You get them to produce 3 times more. The whole of the organization, 500 people, start producing 3 times more because there were no numbers to say that was impossible, right? It just everybody looked busy, running around, crazy. Everything's late. Why? One person. So if it's not that, it can be a group or a department. Crazy thing is in IT, it's nearly always in testing at the end. Right? Why? For lack of interest by everybody about that subject. They prefer making the product than testing it, right? So lack of management attention leads to having it there. It's the worst possible place to have a bottleneck in an organization. Right at the end means you can pile up lots and lots of projects in the company, and they're all blocked in front of testing. You'll then start cheating with your testing and not testing your products properly and get to the market stuff that hasn't been properly tested and then get another spiral of madness. Okay. And the whole thing goes completely mad because of that. Right. So there can be that. There are a few, having said that, there are a few exceptions to this. If you have a few very, very expensive machines, in particular, very expensive testing machines, it can be those machines that are the bottlenecks in. Developing very high performance chips, you need to have a computer that's basically some of the most powerful computers in the world. To test a chip that goes very fast, you need a computer that goes even faster, right? They cost millions, so you don't have several of those. And so sometimes it can be some equipment, but it's mostly people in the project environment.
Right. And a lot of times it's because like those, they select people that they just have too many things on their plate. Like a lot of people demand their skills, their attention, maybe the decision making, what have you. Like that's normally the cause of a lot of bottlenecks. Is that correct? Okay.
Right. And by the way, another rule of thumb that works pretty well is it's certainly not the person who screams the most. Very often it ends up being people who are quiet and not complaining too much, and as a result don't get more people. Okay, and end up being the bottleneck. So you hunt through the system and you see, hey, how come there's so much work here waiting here? Okay. And by the way, if you have trouble finding the bottleneck, I do this so often, I can do it very quickly. It's not the good news is that once you found it, it all makes sense. So it might take you a while to find it. Once you found it, you're certain it was there because everything makes sense. You can work out what's going on. You see all the madness. It explains a lot of things once you found your constraint.
Right. So for the PMs that are watching this now,
Yeah.
many of them are like in the middle of projects. I guarantee you that
Mate,
many projects are delayed, right? So,
yeah.
how, if they wanted to go back and just, okay, I want to quickly identify my bottlenecks, because
Yeah.
another thing is that you might think that you actually your attention might be focused on the wrong thing. Like you might think, okay, like you mentioned, somebody's screaming the loudest, so that's where your attention goes to. But how can they go back and identify true bottlenecks in their project?
If it's a portfolio, look at the number of projects that they have in their queue, right? If there are 40 projects in the company and there are 10 of them waiting in that department, that's probably, that's the queue there. That's the way to do it. If you can work out, if you could convert that into the number of days of work, that's even better. But the first step is just how many projects are stuck here or stuck there. Okay.
Okay.
And depends on the environment, but that's usually not too difficult to find.
Right. Right. So for the portfolio,
I just add, how bad the data is. Quite a few of our clients who have enough money to do it because it's expensive have sophisticated project management software, which costs several $100,000. And this thing claims it can manage capacity, so they have the workload on departments and whatever. Right? Any of these systems that you have that have been in the company from, say, more than 3-4 years, you go in and have a look and look at the numbers, and it's all completely crazy. I won't say who, but one example. They had an average workload on their resources. This is a big company with several thousand people, international. 300% on average on the people. And I said, how do you manage that? Well, that's okay. As we just deal with all the parts of the organization where there's more than 500% workload. Okay.
Right.
That's a funny, strange way to run a company, because it means all the data is wrong, right? How
Right.
long is it going to take you to have a good idea? How long is it going to take you to do this or that? Nobody knows. They're working in little bits and pieces and complete madness. I realize I haven't talked about multitasking, which is probably the main killer of not only of productivity, but of quality and generator of stress, right? We often, I get one of my younger colleagues to just sit behind a resource and count the number of times they switch, right? They switch a task. It's nearly always around 60 different tasks in a day, right? About between 5 and 10 minutes, switching from one task to another, right? And it's always the same, whatever the environment. Why is that? How come everybody's switching just the same amount? It's because they're just getting to just the level before they go mad, right? If they switched every minute, they would go mad. So they don't do that, but they don't stay focused. They just get to the level where they're moving around all over the place and they have a busy day, right? And that's absolutely crazy. Because it leads to not only being inefficient, because the setup time, the permutation time, when I get back onto a file, is going to take me several minutes before I can start adding value to it, right? And the quality problems, it's crazy. The problems people find in quality of projects is not because it was beyond the capabilities and the brain power of the people. It was a silly mistake done under pressure on a Friday evening.
So how are you defining multitasking? So is this switching between different tasks within a project, or switching within? Okay,
Yeah,
so we're not talking about
any switching is bad. Any switching will incur permutation costs, the time to switch to get back onto to produce value on the other task. It can be different tasks within a project, between different projects, between projects and other stuff, between projects and operations, and so forth. Right, and this is really, really bad. It's the number one killer as far as we're concerned. And in quite a few environments, we unfortunately have to produce or propose and implement very stupid rules, such as saying there will be no multitasking between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you will work. You will not do meetings and notifications and panicking and phoning people. At least try and work 2 hours a day.
I see. So because the next question I was going to ask you is because, like, what can you do about this as a project manager, as a leader of the project? Because like this is endemic. It seems it's a habit, right? And so you're really dealing with something that's very, very entrenched, right? But I like the idea of, okay, just having a general rule, like, okay, on afternoons between 2 to 4, like, this is time for deep work. And I know in some organizations that I've been a part of, you have like no meeting days, like no meeting Wednesdays, and that's
Yep.
time to really do deep work, and we can have
Yeah.
meetings elsewhere. And I guess as a project manager, you have control over like meetings and all of that. A lot of meetings actually come from you.
Yes.
So I think you have a great degree of control there. I like that. So I think we can go to questions. I mean, there's a lot more that we could have talked about, but let's go to some of the questions in the chat. By the way, if you have more, if you joined late, if you have questions, just put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them before the end of the show. Okay, so I see more comments. Let's see. This is from Steve Holcomb. I have to drop out, but if you are curious about CCPM, Philip Marris, okay, all right. So this is just Philip. This is his specialty. So if you want to learn more, you can learn from. Do you have a YouTube channel, or is it on LinkedIn?
Do I have a YouTube channel? I'm hoping to get to 1 million views not too long ago.
My bad.
There are 622 videos.
Yeah.
About a quarter of them are not by myself, a horrible lying consultant that exaggerates everything, but by our clients, right? That explain, what they've done and stuff like that. Yeah, there's a lot of videos just on this subject of today. There are about 150 videos between shorts of a minute to a version that explains in over an hour what the details of critical change project management is. Yeah, there's a lot of videos. It's
nice. And do you also share those on LinkedIn as well, or it's
yes.
Okay, both. All right. So yeah, check out his YouTube and his LinkedIn, so you can really do a deep dive into the topic. From Dr. Tia, you were asking what was the name of the book? So the book that he shared was The Goal. The Goal. I've also heard about that book. I think
the other one, by the way, which is worth reading, that was by Eliyahu Goldratt. The other one, which is worth reading, is more recent, now 3 years old, is this one, written by his daughter, Goldratt's Rules of Flow. I don't know if that's visible. Goldratt's Rules of Flow by Efrat Goldratt Ashlag, his daughter. And it's really good. Some nice little rules in there, 8 rules of hygiene for projects, which are really good. There is a book called Critical Chain, by the way, but it's written by Eli Goldratt, but it was written early on in the development of the idea, so it's not necessarily the first thing to read.
Right. Olawale says he's used CCPM in his last role. Amazing. Okay, so LinkedIn user says, I see CCPM as being a methodology with lean mentality that looks at the big picture, but also in detail, identifying the key points on how to deliver a successful project with big focus on risk management, conflict management, bottlenecks based on previous lessons learned and actions. What are your thoughts there, Philip?
Yeah, that's pretty good. I think when it says conflict management and bottlenecks, it's true that not only do you manage, you have to manage both bottlenecks and non-bottlenecks, and in some ways managing non-bottlenecks is more difficult than bottlenecks in many ways. It's an understanding that the ways of managing those two things is nearly the opposite, right? A bottleneck you want to protect so it can produce as much as possible. A non-bottleneck by definition has excess capacity, so you have to admit that it will stop working, right? And therefore people's historic way of judging people, which is are they working or not, right, is made redundant, which means that for 90% of your organization, they are non-bottlenecks. They do not have to work all the time. If they do not work all the time, what are they going to do with their spare time, right? That is a real challenge for organizations. So it's not just bottlenecks, but it's also non-bottlenecks. Because
Hmm.
if you don't accept that you have non-bottlenecks, you will continue asking everybody to work all the time, and they will make up work, and
Right.
your system will just look very, very busy with not much coming out.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So by non-bottlenecks, you mean like, I
Everybody.
guess spare capacity, right? Is that
Yeah,
what you
yeah,
mean? Okay.
yeah. When I repeat, when I look at a company with 500 engineers developing a new aircraft engine, I know, and quite quickly I find it, the bottleneck resources will be maybe these 12 people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which means that 488 of them have plenty of spare capacity,
Right.
even though they look very busy and stressed out.
Yeah. All right, let's go to recommendation. So, we normally do this with every guest. What's one
Yeah,
book you recommend?
yeah.
So, what's one book you recommend?
The goal.
The goal. I thought as much. What's one app you love or recommend?
At the moment, I'm working a lot in Germany, so my favorite app at the moment is Duolingo because I'm learning German.
Oh, nice. And you also speak French, right?
Yep.
Amazing.
Uh,
What? Sorry, you're gonna say.
English people aren't very good at learning foreign languages, but I'm trying to. I already speak a bit of Spanish. I speak perfect French, and I'm trying some German now. Yeah.
Nice. Is it true that after you've learned a few, it now becomes quite easy and you start to see a lot of similarities? Somebody told me that, like, I think maybe once you
Yeah,
speak
that's true,
like
but you have to compensate that by the fact that you're getting older, and as you get older, your brain it gets a bit more slow at picking up new stuff. So you're
right,
right; it should get there. That's the positive side. The negative side is your brain is slowing down.
right. No, amazing. What's one podcast you love or recommend?
There I will prove I'm British with a British passport. BBC podcasts
BBC. All right.
with
Uh,
an English accent and everything. Yep.
what's one productivity hack that actually works for you?
We've talked a lot about multitasking. And not only do we do it with our clients, I do it for myself and for my company. We're very, very careful about not disturbing people's work, not interrupting people. Okay. So basically, I don't use, and my colleagues basically don't really use mobile phones,
Okay.
smartphones, right? People are surprised when they get to know me. I've got one, and it works. It never rings because if anybody phones me up, even if it's an important client and it's not urgent, to say, "Why did you phone me up?" That you just interrupted me. That's not the right way to work, right? So my productivity hack is throw out your smartphone.
That's gonna be tough for many of us.
Yeah. No, but
When
more seriously, be very careful how you use those things, right?
right,
There's a most people are getting disturbed very, very frequently by them, and as a result, both the productivity and the quality of their work and stress goes up, right?
right, for sure. When you're stressed or overwhelmed, what helps you reset?
Well, I have many passions in life. My one which is the best for getting me de-stressed is I do a lot of sailing. I've sailed, over 30,000 nautical miles, more than once around the world and all that stuff.
Wow.
And if I can get to be in the middle of the ocean with no land in sight, then I really get.
Wow.
But that's kind of a heavy solution. So otherwise, I listen to a lot of classical music, and I know I put Johann Sebastian Bach and Goldberg variations, one interpreted by one person or another, and listen to quiet classical music.
Interesting. Interesting. And thanks for sharing that. So Philip, for people that want to get in touch with you, what's the best way that they can do that if they want to learn more about your work? I mean, I know you have your YouTube channel, but what would you say
The
is the best
company
way?
is Marris Consulting, right? Like my surname. And we have a website with lots of stuff on it. And we have a YouTube channel with lots of videos that we've talked about. And we're quite active on LinkedIn, so you can follow us on LinkedIn.
Amazing.
That's and basically on every platform. The Goal by Eliel Goldratt is now 11 million copies in 32 languages, right? I worked with the guy back 40 years ago. And we were in a software company developing software for scheduling. And he disappeared and he wrote a novel. I thought he'd gone mad. The boss who disappears, where a software company comes back, he's written a novel. And he explained, Philip, what's the best-selling book in the world? He always asks questions rather than giving answers. Eddie goes, right? And so I've ended up by working out it was the Bible. He said, well, the Bible, as far as I'm concerned, is a novel to sell a concept, and I wanted to do the same, so I wrote the goal. And so many years later, it's still very well read, and it's still stood the test of time. So it's a remarkable object. But behind that, we had long discussions about how often it is marketing is the constraint in your organization, right? And so we fight that, and we spend a lot of our time doing communication, or what people call content marketing today. So if people are interested in the work we do, they'll be surprised how generous we are, because we really try and design ourselves out of the business by telling people everything they need to know to do these things without us. If they can do it without us, we're happy. There will still be people who need help. So we try and explain everything. And so have a look at, for instance, the YouTube channel. As I say, it's 600 videos, in all shapes and sizes. Whether you're running capex projects, where you're running pharmaceutical projects, where you're running aircraft development projects, there's all sorts of stuff there you can have.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Philip, for spending the time with us and explaining this. I really learned a lot, and I had fun, and I'm sure the audience did as well.
Thank you for considering me for your very prestigious podcast.
Thank you. All right, bye, y'all. See you same time next week. Take care.
Bye-bye.